Okay, I'm over here at the haul truck, and as you can see, it's been turned around. Welcome to Chapter 63 of the haul truck build. We're going to get into a bunch of topics on the haul truck this week, but I've got to tell you, there's something that happened, and I kind of screwed something up. But let me get into that, and I'll tell you, I'm not really sure how I'm going to fix it yet, but let me get into it, and we'll kind of address that as we go along. So again, welcome to Chapter 63 of the haul truck build. So it's a day that I am posting Chapter 62, and I just got done producing it, and while it was doing that, I had been working on the truck, and one of the things that I had done is I had actually gotten that airbag bracket onto it. Now, not all 8 bolts are into it, but there's 2 bolts on each side are into it, plus the bolt for the shock mount. What the issue is I've ran into another issue or another problem. Maybe it's not a problem. One of the things that I was kind of looking at is the plane of the bracket on this side is pitched down towards the pumpkin, whereas the plane of the bracket on the other side isn't pitched as much. Then if you get back here and kind of look at that bracket, it slopes up. Well, what I've determined was, if you look at the trailing arm on that the rear of that air suspension bracket, where the J or S, however you want to look at it, comes down, and then you look at this one, you'll notice that this one is bent out farther, so it's kicking the side up. So what I tried to do is, you see that I've got that jack sitting there on the floor. I put the jack in between that thing and the frame, and tried jacking it down. Well, it took the whole trailing, the whole air support bracket down. So I blocked this side up and then tried to jack it down, and I straightened it out a little bit. It's actually straightened out more than was. It's straightened out now more than it was. But the problem is it's still kicked up, and I can't, in my limited time on working on it, I doesn't seem like I can get it down any farther than I've gotten it already. Now, what I want to do is kind of think about it. In worst case scenarios, I could always, if I can't get it straightened out, and I don't want to heat that thing to straighten it out. In the worst case scenario, if I can't get it straightened out, I can always compensate for it by mounting the shock from side to side differently to compensate for that elevation difference. And let's call it an elevation difference, because what it does, if I tried to put it at the same plane, it would twist the frame a little bit. So to compensate for it, if I can't get it straightened out, what I will do is make the brackets for the shocks and the airbags from side to side different to compensate for that bent trailing arm bar. And it is bent. It is bent. But what you see, what I've done is I've just taken some 1/2-inch rod and put in there. Actually, the frame is being supported up off of the suspension by that rod. You can see that the things are loose. So that's put in there like that so that I can maneuver this thing around. As I said, I wanted to got to clean everything up, and then what I'll do is I'll take this out and back it into the spot. So in lieu of trying to get the sleeper test fitted on it. I need to give some thought to that. It doesn't have to be addressed right away. I've been in discussions with a guy from Fry Heavy Duty, and he found the airbags, new airbags that I need for this thing. So he's got them coming for me. Again, this thing doesn't have to be fixed right away. At some point in time, of course it's got to be fixed, but let me give it some thought and see if I can come up with something to do. In worst case scenario, I can always make the brackets for the shocks and the airbags different from side to side to compensate for it. Okay, we're going to do a little unboxing here, but the stuff isn't really in a box, so you're just going to have to deal with me taking it out of the truck. These are the new airbags for the haul truck. These are a replacement bag of the ones that came off the original air suspension. And I'm going to reuse that same brand, same model number. But there they are. There's one. Here's the other one. No, I'm not sure where this clip is going to go into this episode, but as you know, there's an issue that I have, or you might not know, but let me explain it to you. There's an issue I have with the trailing arms. One of them is bent at a different angle than the other one, so I might have to, and I don't want to, I tried to rebend it, but I don't, so it didn't work. Well, it worked maybe a little bit, but it really, basically, let's say it didn't work. And I don't want to jeopardize it by trying to force it, bend it, and weaken it by doing that. So what I might do is just put the two airbags at a different height, and that will be explained to you later in detail. But the other things that I got was and some of these things that I had talked about before. These are those Pro Torque nuts, that axle nuts that are going to go on there. Instead of having the two, I've got one in here actually, the two smaller nuts, and that locking tab in it, I'm going to switch these. There's two of these on each side with a locking washer that you peen over a tab on it to hold the nut in place. Gets replaced by these. They're called Pro Torque nuts. They're reusable, and they have the locking tab built into it, and I'll show you that. The other thing that I got was gaskets for the axle. And the reason why I'm using the gaskets, and I've explained this also, is that somebody had put silicone sealant on the axle, and I had a hell of a time getting those cone-shaped those cones out of there to get the axle or the axle out of the axle housing. I just didn't want to reuse that silicone, so I had them get me gaskets for it so that I don't give that same problem to somebody else or myself if I ever have to tear this thing back apart again. But anyways, I'll bring you back. Okay, back on the Ford F750. Probably one of the last shop updates, or not, I'm sorry, haul truck videos was about me being able to turn this around with a forklift truck. What I was going to do is hook it on the forklift truck, take it around outside and turn it around so that I could back it in so we could get the sleeper on and test fit it. Well, we got that new forklift truck. If anybody watched my shop update, you'll understand about having to get the other new forklift truck because the other one was stolen. So that kind of delayed this process. So we got the new forklift truck, and this morning I took it outside and turned it around. Now, again, what I've got to do is I'm going to put the sleeper up onto the lift and then back the truck underneath it so that I can test fit it on there. But there's a couple of things that have got to happen. The extensions, fork extensions that I had made up for the old forklift will not fit on the new forklift. So I've got to get some new extensions. New extensions are critical because that's the only way that I can pick that sleeper up is get with long fork extensions. So I've got to get that. I had to take the guy that we bought the forklift truck off of wanted his propane tank back because he leases those propane tanks. He doesn't own them outright, so he needed the propane tank back. So after I got the truck turned around this morning, I took the propane tank back to him. So two things have got to happen before I can test fit the sleeper: fork extensions and the propane tank. But anyways, here's the truck over here turned around. Now, for some reason, it's cocked at an angle, and I think it's a floor, but you could probably see it. It is tipped down. And I'm positive it's a floor, but I'll double check it. I'll go around and just check all the frame measurements. I can see that the frame is tipped down, but I just want to make sure it's not the front suspension. Something didn't happen to the front suspension when I turned it around, but I'm pretty sure that it's a floor. So anyways, we'll be back into the haul truck. As discussed in the first clip of this series on the haul truck, I've got to figure out what I'm going to do with the trailing arms on this thing. Again, I try to straighten it out. I don't want to really don't want to have to take it out, take the trailing arm off and put it in a hydraulic press to see if I can straighten it out. I think it'll, I'm not really sure. I still need to give it more thought. But anyways, here's the haul truck turned around in the shop, ready for test fit of the sleeper. Okay, I'm back here behind the haul truck, and it's a day after I shot the clip that I just showed you about the forklift truck and turning it around and everything else. So I had talked about the cab, and I hope you're not getting blown out by that light coming in from the door, but I talked about the cab. What I did is I started taking some measurements on it, and what I found is, to me, when I visually looked at it, it looked like the frame was twisted. In other words, one frame rail was up higher than the other one, which it was. What I did is put a straight edge across it, measured to the top of the plate on the axle U-bolt bracket on both sides, and it was off. It was off 1.25 inches. So I straightened that out. I straightened it out by using those rods that I had used to hold the frame and trailing arm bracket in position. So I've got that. Then I went to the front of the truck, and I've got the same thing on the front axle. Now, why I've got it on the front axle, I have absolutely no idea in the world. I'm not sure. Okay, hang on. I'm going to throw a little insert in here. One of the things that I can't figure out about this 5/8 is I'm not sure if this wasn't that way to begin with. I mean, I'm going to have to go back through the videos of when I put this axle in and double check to see if I ever did any measurements between the axle and the frame before. No, I probably didn't, because the springs and everything are the same, and the springs fit onto the top of the axle plate. So there was probably never any measurements taken, because basically the axle is going to sit, the springs are going to sit on the axle in the same place that they were with the old axle. The only thing that ever changed was the U-bolt spacing of the bolts on the axle, and that was compensated for by those brackets that I made to house the spring, the leaves, and conform to the new U-bolt pattern. But again, that has absolutely nothing to do with height. It just encases the narrower leaf springs from this truck to compensate to what was larger leaf springs on this axle that I replaced it with. So when it sat in the front, when it was turned around, again, my floors and this part of the shop and the back part of the shop are different from the floors up near the grating. So when it was turned around, maybe that it is sitting differently somehow. I'm not really sure of that, but there is a 5/8 difference. So what I've got to do is kind of go back through old videos and see if I ever took that into consideration. So let's continue on with where I interrupted you here. Really not sure why. There is 5/8 of an inch difference from the top of the axle to the top of the frame on this side, from the top of the axle to the top of the frame on that side. Now, those leaf springs were the existing springs that were in the truck, and the truck sat fairly well. It sat really well. I mean, it was drivable. There was no noticeable difference. Now, going to have to go through it and figure out exactly why that is. I'm not really sure why it is, but yeah. Those leaf springs are sitting on the top of the axle on both sides, and Yeah, I'm not really sure why it is, but I'll go through and figure that out and see if that straightens that cab out any. How I noticed it was that cab, and I had talked to you about that before. When it sat here, now the floor is pitched. The floor is pitched that way, from right to left, but not as much as the cab is pitched. So I'm going to go through, figure it out. I've still got to decipher what I'm going to do with that one trailing arm being bent. I have a feeling I'm going to leave it and just readjust the brackets that hold the airbag and the shock absorber from side to side. In other words, compensate the bracket, the holding bracket, the upper holding bracket from one side to the other side, because I don't want to get into having to bend that, take that trailing arm out and try and bend it to match from side to side. So, but I'll bring it back. It's something that's going to have some thought put into it. Everything is going to have some thought put into it. What I'm going to do with that, why that front end is like that, I have absolutely no idea why that front end is like that. The spring shackles are original. The springs are original. There is no like pivot arm on the shackle where one could be up and one could be down. Again, I'm really not sure why it's like that, but I'll work it out and figure this whole thing out and let you know what I come up with. Okay, so let this be the last clip of this, because again, it's getting long and I'm not going to be able to do anything else. I'd like to get this video out, and I'm not going to be able to do any work. I still haven't gotten the tank for the forklift or anything like that. So in the last clip, there was an insert. Before the insert, I told you that I had fixed this problem back here. What I had done is it was off. It was off whatever it was, an inch and something, an inch and a quarter or something. How I did it is I shortened the rod over there and drew the frame down so that it was even across with a measurement off of the top of the axle to the top of the frame. So it was even, the frame is even with the axle. And I said it was fixed. It's not fixed because that rod is under tension to hold that thing down there. Somehow I have to figure out a way of holding it down there, because I can't use the rear suspension to do it, because, and I kind of brought these over here as props, you have an airbag and you have a shock absorber. Neither one of them are going to hold the frame in position. If it's racked, let's call it racked. I had called it twisted before. Let's call it racked, where one frame rail was higher than the other frame rail. It can't be held the way that that rod is holding it right now by the use of a shock absorber or an airbag. There's nothing in there solid that would hold it in place. So I have to get that racking that happened in the rear, and I have no doubt that I caused that racking because I knew the frame rails were straight and true with each other up until the point of where I tried to bend that bar down. And I tried to bend that bar. Hang on. Okay, I'm back after the phone call. actually it wasn't my wife, which usually it is, but a guy that I used to work with, coronavirus conversation, stuff like that. What I was talking about is I know that I had caused it. I knew that the frame was true and straight after I had extended it, and up until the point I still knew that it was true and straight after I had mounted the brackets for the rear axle. I have no doubt that I racked the frame by trying to straighten this trailing arm out. So what I've got to do is, like I had said before I was interrupted by the phone call, I had told you that it's a solid bar holding it there, and that's how I mentioned that I had fixed the problem. Well, the problem isn't fixed unless I take tension off of that solid bar and the frame stays that way. Then it is fixed. But I have no doubt that I'm going to release tension off of that bar, and the frame is probably going to re-rack somewhat back to being off. Maybe not to the extent that it was before, but to some extent it's probably going to do it. Probably what I'm going to have to do is rack it the other way past where I want it to. It's like kind of bending a piece of rod. You kind of have to bend it a little past where you want it because it'll deflect back or spring back. Might have to do that same thing and then come up with a way of stabilizing it, because there's no way that the airbag or a shock absorber is going to hold it solid. Now, granted, I have to put a panhard bar in there, but that's not going to fix the problem either. I have to get it back to the way it was. I'm not going to leave the frame wrecked. I would never do that. There's going to be some kind of a bed up on the top of the frame rails, a hitch for the trailer, whether it is a gooseneck or a fifth wheel type of hitch, that's going to be up there. There's going to be a bed up there, and I'm not going to leave it wrecked. But anyways, so I've got those issues. I mean, I still have the issue of that bracket being lower on one side, right-hand side, than it is on the left-hand side because of the bent trailing arm on that thing. But I'm not going to fight with that thing anymore. Probably what I'm going to do is just offset the shock mount and airbag mount to compensate for that. But I would never leave the frame racked and offset those things with a racked frame. I need to get that fixed, and I need to get the front fixed. But right now, it is correct in the back, according to measurements off of the axle. Let me go back and investigate what I did when I put that axle in, if any measurements were taken or not, or if it was just put in that way. But I can still test fit the sleeper on there. I need to get that sleeper. I've never actually seen the underside of that sleeper. So I want to get that sleeper over and up in the air so that I can see the underside of it and see what's going on. I know what there is for a mounting brackets for the shock and the airbags in the back of it. I don't know what there is in the front underneath here, how that attaches to the frame members. So I want to get that up in the air and figure that stuff out. But anyways, this is going to be it for this video. Leave a comment if you guys have got any suggestions on it. How, once I get that frame back, how I can re-stiffen it to keep it more in that position. It's kind of hard. Let me just show you one thing. You see this cross support bracket here? Well, it's got those bars that come down. It's not a bar, but pieces of metal that come down, and it's kind of like a gusset actually. And I kind of think if I do another gusseted cross member, maybe back here someplace, and gusset it, it will have that same effect of helping keep it stabilized and from racking again. But anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Hit that like button, comment, subscribe.